Hi, today I want to talk about AGENTS.MD or CLAUDE.md files or rule files in Cursor. Each one calls it differently, but the concept is the same. As we navigate from programming to actually orchestrating AI systems and navigating them, that files becomes really important. Because the LLMs are great at generating content and generating code, at doing all those things. And that AGENT.MD or CLAUDE.md file is something that gets anchored to the system prompt and being sent each time you send a message, it's present. And a lot of people are not using it or using it incorrectly and have spent a considerable amount of time researching this and understanding this. Why? Because it's one of the pillars. It is a bit like the whisperer of the LLMs. This is the thing you tell them, and this is where you define how you want your project to behave. It's the level of customization that attached to you. It's how we make things work in an effective manner. Whether it's code, that's one type of AGENTS.MD or CLAUDE.md or rules file that tell it how the project structure should look like, what it should have inside. It's important when we're defining agents or sub-agents or skills to really understand how these files work. It's also important when we're creating just general purpose agents for the LinkedIn post generator or whatever it is we do is really important as well. So tying it all in together, this file, it becomes very, very important to understand the structure of it, how it gets built, and how to build it really, really well. And that's what I want to do today is I want to show you and I want to focus on the coding agent or the engineering background that I have. How do we create a good AGENTS.MD for an engineering project? So I'll kind of dive right into it. For now, click like and subscribe. Would appreciate the support. Let's get started. So what I did in essence is I started researching and reading the different guidelines and understanding AGENTS.MD. I looked at what defines a good CLAUDE.md, and Claude, it's called a CLAUDE.md, same like AGENT.MD. I was looking at Anthropic ideas. I was looking at OpenAI. There's a really interesting blog post from GitHub. They looked at 2,500 repositories and came up with some really solid suggestions. I looked at other things like AI Heroes. There's a repository called AGENTS.MD. I'll share that link later. That actually has quite a lot of different examples of AGENTS.MD. And then I continued to reading and researching. So once I finished the theoretical research, I started doing practical research. Now, in this video, I'm going to focus on the coding AGENTS.MD, but there's different ways to structure sub-agents together and multiple agents, and how do you manage a non-coding versus coding agent. And those are really important differentiators, which we'll do follow-up videos. But let's jump into what I did next. Is after I've seen the patterns emerge, I clearly can say there's not an exact way to make an AGENT.MD that's correct or incorrect, but there are patterns. And the reality is the models change often, and these things can change. So think of your AGENTS.MD or CLAUDE.md as an iterative thing you do with your team constantly. However, I did make some conclusions. I even built a framework to test AGENTS.MD. So let me show you a little bit of what I discovered. I started very, very simple AGENT.MD. And again, you got to be really methodical, like agent instructions. This goes into the context, so that's not a good thing to include. And then I started explaining stuff in words. I quickly realized that actually giving it code examples is much better how it works. Code generation works better. You can highlight things. You can give it the instructions of what to use and what not to use. I even tried an enormous file with like imports and giving it very detailed code examples. But the law of diminishing returns happens there. Very long files make it very slow to process. Your code generation becomes slower, and you're sending this as a system prompt each time. It also has attention. And when you do that much, it actually loses focus. So what I want to do now is I want to jump in and show you how I create an AGENTS.MD and give you some very precise tips on what I think you should put in your AGENTS.MD or your CLAUDE.md, and how do you do that on the coding. So let's jump into that part. So now I want to show you how I create a CLAUDE.md or AGENTS.MD and what are the important points that I would really emphasize on. So it's very easy to create a CLAUDE.md. You just go in Claude Code. But whatever platform you're using, it doesn't matter. Use the LLM agent to create your initial version. And I've run this through a bunch of iterations. So the project's very small. It will find the project and probably understand also from my past, what do I like in my CLAUDE.md. And you can see it has running, it has an overview, it has architecture. I like that file format, but I like it to create the sections under my naming. I like to give it a overview, remove the guidance, notes, implied. We want to remove everything. You don't want a single thing that's not there. The context is so precious. So we're going to remove that. CLI. Just keep project structure with stack. Change running to commands. And move files to structure. So I like to kind of create those because that's really important. So now it would reiterate this thing and recreate it in a format that I like. Structure, overview. We don't need all those things. We don't need that. Yes, I want to rewrite it. And now we have a much better Claude overview. We don't need the overview as well. Commands, structure. This is perfect. We want to trim this down as we go more and more and more and more and keep it very, very concise. So one thing that I really think is important, boundaries. Sorry, boundaries is really important. Never commit secrets, API keys, or sensitive data. Oh, I have a typo here. Then I want to say, which is really important, do not delete files. Another really important one is keep files 200, 800. Do not make huge long files. And this is really important. This tells it to manage the context really well. If you make, when we model a file for, when we code for humans, we make things very, very modular and very structured and a separation of concerns. LLMs need some of that, but a lot less, because the multiple calls make multiple token calls, and that means multiple tools. And so if you have 4 files, you need 4 calls when you have a larger file. So if we have, a converter and some data structures around an endpoint, put all of them in one file, call it API endpoint, put everything in there, keep it concise. That makes things a lot easier for the LLM to understand, but don't let it grow out of whack and go completely crazy. And these are examples when you start to think about the boundaries. Never commit secrets, do not delete files, keep files in a certain structure, and the length is very important. You can add more, really leaving it up to you. So that's about boundaries. Code example. Now, before I add a code example, I want to run through a little test, like add a function to create to auto-generate a to-do description. Let's ask it to generate a function and see what it writes. And this is where I want to talk to you about the coding style. And I'll also add a couple of tips around the coding style. So it's going to source activate, all right? It's going to run through this, and it's going to use that to generate a description. So now you could see it created the Claude Code. Claude Code created the function, and you can see it has an import and it has the client creation, etc. Yes, let's create the utils. And this is an example of what it's done. Now what I want to do is I want to use code examples to explain to it further how to do that. And there's a couple of things, like it adds some docstrings. Docstring is a really important thing for LLMs. This is another really good tip. Put this in your AGENTS.MD. The way LLMs work with denoising or demasking is that it's trained by actually taking away parts of the code and then adding it back. And so docstrings become so important that they're critical. They prevent model drift. They prevent consistency across models. That's a tip that most places don't tell you, but that's a really important part, is to give very concise and precise and helpful docstrings. So it created that. Now, CLAUDE.md to create docstrings. Make sure good details output and code examples. And we can take this do don't just do that. And this is an example. We're going to ask it to modify the Claude.md and we'll regenerate and now we'll ask it to regenerate the function. Let's see what it does on the generate description. Okay, and you see now the docstring has changed. All function must have do, don't, generate description. Exactly, this is exactly what we need. We'll make this edit to Claude Code, and now if we run it again, it will actually generate much better docstrings. And now it's already went out forward and updated the docstring to make it a lot more precise. And this is another example. So we can go back to the Claude.md and you could see it has structure, docstring standards. Let's change that name to both, and then all functions, summary of what it contains, etc. Boundaries. We can also add another section that's gotchas and include code examples of things that happened, things that worked well in our project, things that didn't. All right, so these are my tips to how to create a good AGENT.MD coding standard. And I've given you some really, really important things that I think you should use and be aware of. But it really is up to you to construct your AGENT.MD with the core points of your project, whether it's gotchas, whether it's coding styles. And you should also start to think about orchestration. You can extract things into shared files around infra and around commands. You can nest them. You can create AGENT.MD or Claude.md inside specific folders to control them, and they actually stack up. But don't forget, they all connect to the context. So you must be really, really diligent about what goes in there, and you must constantly make sure not to add too much. So that's all for me. Good luck. Click subscribe, and I see you in the next video.